This patient wants a locator overdenture, and we're going to try to plan it on 4 implants. This can be tough because sometimes it's very hard to get 4 implants relatively parallel, which in my mind is a requirement for locator success. So we're going to load up the DICOM files. You have to navigate to where you have the DICOM files located on your computer. Start to bring them in. And here you can limit the field of view, give your computer a little break on processing power. Don't cut off the fiducial markers, though. That's important. So it loads the DICOM set. I'm going to clean up the 3D rendering a little bit just to get rid of some of the excess scattered material that I don't need to be looking at, as well as make it a little easier to mark the fiducial markers. You don't want to remove the fiducial markers when you do this either. So we're using the cut tool on the surfaces menu to make this happen. Not a requirement, just something that I kind of like to do. So now we're going to load the DICOM set for the denture. We want to have the denture in the planning process so that we can see the prosthetics. Make sure that our locators are well located within the denture. We need about 10 millimeters of vertical space above the implants to house the housing of the locator attachment and the attachment itself. So here we want to eliminate any of the area that base that the denture was sitting on as it was being scanned. This would interfere with the scan appliance fabrication when you're fabricating the scan appliance guide. So this will bring you to the wizard where you can align the patient fiducial markers with the denture fiducial markers, and then the computer can put the two together. It's getting rid of some of the excess anatomy so that the fiducial markers are more clear. And now we can match up these fiducial markers quite simply. You want to orient both sides in the same orientation so that you're clicking on the same surface of the fiducial marker on both the patient side and the denture side. As you can see, there's one marker on the patient side that's not present on the denture side, so of course we will not include that marker on the patient side. Gets a little tedious, but if you blow this up to as big as you can get it, it's a little easier to select those dots. Of course, we're holding the shift key to make the selections. So we'll leave that last dot unselected since it doesn't present on the denture side. Now, when we select OK, the software will bring the denture into the plan, and we can use that to position our implants relative to the needs of the locator housing. I'm just going to jump right into implant planning. I think the nerves are relatively out of the way of what I'm trying to do here, but at the end, we'll go ahead and map the nerves and make sure of all that. You'll see that in a minute. Just positioning and sizing the implants, get them in, get them parallel. I'm going to start with the two in the front, get them positioned well relative to the prosthetics and parallel to each other. Then I will copy and move those two implants parallel to each other posteriorly in order to find the location for our two posterior implants. So we're trying to get this at a good point. That selected abutment is at 10 millimeters of height, which tells me as long as that's within the denture, I'm good to go for the locator attachment as far as room. Just evaluating a different sized implant. I sometimes go through 2 or 3 trials, figuring out exactly which implant size I want relative to the amount of bone we have. So now I'm duplicating that implant, moving it to the other side. Moving them in the axial view will keep them parallel to each other. Makes it easier for planning. I'm going to make this denture a little bit transparent so I can work through the denture on positioning these implants. I didn't like the way they were leaning coming through this the occlusal surfaces, so I'm wanting to upright those a little bit. So now I'm going to parallel the number 27 implant back to the number 22. Now I like that projection better through the denture. I'm kind of thinking that maybe the implants are a little too close together. I kind of like to keep implants an absolute minimum of, in this area, an absolute minimum of 8 millimeters on separation. And the rationale is that if we ever wanted to put a hater attachment in here, that's the amount of space you need at a bare minimum. So I'm going to slide these apart so they're probably 11 millimeters apart and sort of in the position of the distal of the lateral incisors. So there we are, moving one, now moving the other. And we'll evaluate that position, and you'll see it's kind of in the distal of the lateral incisors in this particular case. Really doing some very, very minor fine tuning of where I want those implants to be. Now we're going to recheck the projections. Since we moved the implants, we have to recheck the radiographic images. Once again, just evaluating different implants and platforms. So that I can come to a final decision of what I want. Now I'll do one final paralleling of the other implant to this one. And then we'll go back and double check that implant as well to make sure that it projects properly within the denture and relative to the bone. Trying different implants just to see what I'd like best. And since I moved that implant, we'll parallel again. So now I've duplicated the implant at 27 or 22, and I moved it distal back to about the 19 position, 19 to 20 area. And now we can work with that implant. As long as I move it in the axial window, I actually keep it parallel. But at any time, I can always go back and reparallel it to the 22 to keep all three of these implants parallel. So I'm going to choose a different implant, a little bigger diameter, a little shorter length to avoid problems with the lingual concavity in this particular patient. Now I'm going to parallel it back to 22. So now we've got three implants in parallel. And I'm really good with the amount of denture above that implant for locator attachment. We'll continue to tweak it just a little bit. Just evaluating other positions, see if there's anything better than what I've previously selected. You see I've got plenty of room in the denture, well over 10 millimeters. Labeling your sites appropriately allows you to pick from the list much more efficiently. Now we're going to duplicate the implant at 27 and slide it back into the number 29 position. I'm also modifying the height of these abutments so they'll stick up above the denture. It's not wanting to drag the one that I want it to, so I'm playing with it. But eventually I just drag the one over and then relabel them, so I keep my labels correct. I think what happened to me on this is that the computer, I was running several things in the background. The computer was running a little low on resources. I had another little glitch later on, but as usual, there's always a workaround. So here we are relabeling, getting the labels back right again so that I can pick from the list very quickly. So we'll evaluate number 29, get it positioned exactly where we want it, and make sure that we're parallel and not in danger of perforating the lingual plate. Fine tuning, final evaluation, looking everything over. Avoiding that lingual plate. Starting to get there now. We've got 4 implants well within bone, projecting nicely into the denture. Plenty of room for our locator attachments. We're able to get them all parallel, which will help out in the long run as far as managing locator inserts and not wearing them out too quickly. So I'm checking the parallelism implant's maximum angle is set at 0, and I have no warnings. That means everything's parallel. Now we're going to add fixation pins. You can work in all the different views to add the pins. I sometimes like working in the 3D because it gives me a general orientation. Of course, you want to evaluate the pin relative to the bone. You need it to go into the bone and have resistance to vertical displacement. But at the same time, I like to tip these pins so that they're not interfering with the lip as much as possible. That can be a real problem in the surgery with up pressure from the lip. Can cause a lot of problems. So I'll also design these pins without sleeves so that they can be shorter and therefore also less inclined to engage the lip. So I'm trying to get an upward projection on that head of that pin, but not so much that it won't retain the denture. It won't keep it in position. It's a bit of a compromise between holding the denture down versus excessive up pressure from the lip. So now we're duplicating that pin, moving it over. So I'm going to have one pin in the midline and then one pin between the distal implants. Keep working with them, evaluate them in the bone. You don't want them to penetrate the lingual cortical plate. Enough retention, but not excessively low so that there's excessive lip pressure. Going to duplicate it again and move it to the patient's right side. I see a little remnant of the base that this denture was sitting on. I'm going to take care of that by cutting it away as well. So now I'm going to set the parameters of these pins so that it won't use sleeves, rather it'll just pin straight through the printed resin. So we'll end up making a resin sleeve for this pin that the pin will fit perfectly inside of. These guide hole diameters can be adjusted, while Blue Sky normally sets the pin for the sleeve that goes along with the fixation pin. If you tone it down and you know the tolerance of your printer, you can just add the tolerance of your printer to the diameter of the fixation pin, and then your pin will go straight through the resin and hold the guide in place. When you do this, the offset is 0 because you want the pin to just go flush down to the resin. The offset is 0 because there's not a lip height on the pin sleeve. Since we don't have a pin sleeve, there is no lip, and so the offset is 0. So I'll check that for all the pins, making sure, check and double check that we've got the settings all correct. Just kind of continue to check, looking everything over, making sure everything looks correct. And this is where the resources, I think, were running a little low, and the computer would just not allow me to use the raise sleeve function, so I had to do it manually for each implant. A simple shutdown restart of my computer actually allowed that functionality to come back, so I think it had to do with resources. Not a big deal. I'm just changing the offset so I can use a longer drill, and knowing the BioHorizon protocol allows me to do that, I still have stop position control. That's why these offsets are red. It's telling me that I've modified it from the normal protocol. When you can use the raise sleeve feature, it won't turn red because the software also knows, Blue Sky knows about the extension sleeves for the various implants. So now we're going to create a surgical guide from the scan appliance and take a look at that. Sometimes these surgical guides, the sleeves, if they penetrate the bottom of the denture, they will leave the guide wall extension underneath the denture. So that has to be removed physically with a handpiece or an acrylic burr prior to surgery, especially if you're doing something flapless, which really you can't do if your sleeve is going to extend that far. So Typically, we will make one guide without the implant sleeves turned on just so we can set our pins. And then we'll come back and lay the flap, allow the lingual tissue and the posterior tissue to hold our denture posteriorly, and the pins set our denture anteriorly. But in this case, I was able to get rid of all of the extensions by raising the sleeves. And so I really don't have any interference that way. So we're only going to end up needing one guide to handle the entire case. But as you can see, none of the guide wall is extending underneath the intaglio surface of the denture. So we're pretty good to go with all that. So I'll actually just get rid of the green guide and leave just the blue one behind, since they're essentially identical. We can see we have no collisions with implants and pins, so we're all good there. Now we do want to go ahead and evaluate the nerves just to make sure that we have no violations of nerve zone of safety. So we're going to map the nerves now. won't let me move that handle for the nerve. I like to move the handle so the nerve appears clearly down in the panoramic window. It won't let me move it. So I end up having to turn the implants off. I'm just too close to that other implant, and it wants to magnetically attach to that. You'll find this kind of thing sometimes. There's usually a workaround. So I think what I do is turn the implants off, and I'm trying to lock the implants. That doesn't seem to work. Won't let me move it. Lets me move the others, but it won't let me move that one. So you see right here, I get wise and I turn the implants off, and now it lets me move it. I'm just trying to make it as clear as I can down in that panoramic window. Okay, so here we go. We can mark the nerve. Just usually mark it all the way through, and then come back and add a nerve for the mental foramen. Well, I can see that I didn't discontinue the previous nerve before I marked the mental foramen, so deleted that, go back to the add a nerve, and now mark the mental foramen the way that I like to. Just tweaking with it. If I didn't like the first one or two, I went back and redid it till I got it the way that I wanted it. Now we're good to go. I like to turn on the original anatomy and kind of see that we're exiting the mental foramens. And we can now evaluate clearance between the nerves, between the implants, between the pins, one final time before we fabricate our surgical guide. Turn everything back on. And of course, we have no warning, so we're not close to nerves, we're not close to implants. Pins are clear. So this guide is ready to go. It can be printed and then scheduled surgery. Well, I hope this has helped, and if it helps you to plan your locator overdentures, then that was the intent. At the end of the video, it'll give you my email address if you want to contact me with any questions or comments. Be happy to correspond with you. You take care and have a good day.